Hello and welcome to another analytical video, this time shifting focus to the oldest of the factions. So without further ado, let's get to it. Ranking the Necron Dynasties. So for those who haven't seen the previous ranking videos, here's the skinny. These videos are not geared to be a top 10 tier list. They're not trying to advocate which dynasties are definitively the best or worst. It instead will paint a picture of each dynasty's playstyle on the tabletop, demonstrating how each of the dynasty's mechanics skew. Basically, the goal is to show the differences, which I think is pretty useful for players out there who are looking to build a new army and are curious to see if a particular subfaction will provide the mechanical style they are looking for. With that said, there were some challenges in shifting gears off of Marines. Mainly that the vast majority of subfactions don't have the plethora of rule support that the Marines do. And without it, the previous method I used to rank and categorize subfactions is insufficient. The problem was inevitable, and so I adapted the methodology to best represent the non-Marine subfactions. And the process yielded some changes I think are foundational improvements. So you know the drill. The first part of this video will be explaining what that logic is. And if you don't care for the details and just want to get to the results, jump to this timecode. As mentioned, the non-Marine subfactions couldn't use the existing methodology, since without the volume of data, the average isn't going to be as well defined. So with the goal of maintaining the integrity of the results, I have made a few adjustments to the process. The first change-up was to create a distinction between the rules which are army-wide and those which occur in individual instances, such as stratagems, relics, warlord traits, etc., which I will colloquially refer to as back-end tools. As an example, here is the divided attribute chart for Necrons on the faction level. In green we have the Necrons' common army-wide abilities, between living metal, reanimation protocols, and their command protocols. The shape demonstrates they skew highest towards defense/restorative mechanics. Offensive efficiency and flexibility are actually an even split, with their combat predilection favoring shooting over melee. And on the back-end tools front, they have a pretty even distribution. This separation in the data was something I didn't do in the previous analyses. The need for it just wasn't as apparent, since Marines have so much more rule support on the subfaction level. But I feel there is valuable context provided in having the distinction, and I will probably maintain this going forward. And like with the previous, the mechanics in this analysis were evaluated based on the same criteria as that of the previous analyses. For those curious, the rubric is on screen now. The next major change-up is the removal of the units chart within the layout, which may seem like a step backwards, so I will do my best to explain why I've decided so. The crux of it is, I don't feel an attribute chart effectively conveys the qualities of units. During the first analysis on Space Marines, I excluded units because I considered unit choice to be the method by which players shift and skew a subfaction's playstyle, and I stand by that being true. However, I received some good criticism that subfactions may have exclusive units that can push a faction's playstyle if they are used, which rightly so feels odd to exclude. So in the Chaos Space Marine analysis video, I included a units chart to try and account for this. But honestly, units are just so multivariate. They have multiple attributes and abilities that have varying effectiveness in different circumstances, that also synergize with other mechanics and units. There is so much going on that each unit could probably have a fairly intensive analysis of their own. They simply can't be done justice with a single chart, and certainly not a single chart for multiple units. So I have decided to remove units as an element of the analysis layout. Although I will speak to the exclusive units within a subfaction and how it relates to their attribute graph as it demands. Now let's head over to the ranked results. So here's how to read these charts. The number beside each chart's label refers to the number of qualifiable mechanics that were able to be evaluated based on the methodology described earlier. Relating to the attribute chart, as mentioned in the methodology update, two graphs represent army-wide abilities and back-end tools. I've maintained army-wide rules as green across all the subfactions. Offensive efficiency relates to mechanics which offer performance increases relating to damage output. Offensive efficiency also informs shooting and melee propensities, so between the three you can read how a subfaction's combat potency and preference skews. Defensive/restoratives are just that, methods to mitigate damage or regain wounds. Flexibility refers to exceptions to core rules, and abilities to restrict enemy play. And it's worthy of note, factions with high flexibility will often have means of mitigating damage through control/restrictions provided by those exceptions. However, unlike defensive qualities, they will require a higher skill floor to leverage. Mobility, in addition to visualizing how fast a subfaction is, importantly informs how effective a subfaction will be able to capitalize on their melee combat potential. And subfactions which score high in flexibility and mobility will typically have a more dynamic playstyle. Relating to the secondary charts, they visualize the number of mechanics that pertain to those areas. Cast and Deny relates to mechanics which enhance reliability, or the amount of attempts which can be performed. Mortal Wounds and leadership/morale mechanisms are pretty self-explanatory. To gain some context when looking at how subfactions score, I have compiled the mean averages of all the subfactions' attributes here charted in purple, with the dotted stroke. This is comprised of just the army-wide rules, since those are the rules that almost always carry more weight in characterizing the playstyle of a subfaction. Let's start with the Necron Dynasty, since they are the marketing face of the faction, and take it from there. For Necron, as well as the other Necron dynasties, the publications used will be their current 9th edition codex. The Silent King's dynasty takes on a pretty emblematic shape, focusing highest towards defense, which is provided by the initial perk of their dynastic code being a 5-up Feel No Pain versus Mortal Wounds, and their command protocol Double Dip being the protocol of the Undying Legions, the defensive one, granting them access to boosting living metal and reanimation protocols at the same time. The second perk of their dynastic code is identical to that of the Salamanders, wherein each unit can reroll one wound roll each time it makes a ranged attack or a melee attack, which results as an even split for ranged or melee combat preference. When it comes to their back-end tools, the Necron Dynasty have a laser-sharp focus for flexibility. Of their 3 unique mechanics, 2 provide exceptions to the function of command protocols. A Warlord trait which allows a command protocol to be assigned to 2 battle rounds instead of 1, and the Necron Relic which boosts the command protocol range from 6 inches to 9 inches, and allows those units to gain both benefits of the active command protocol. And their Stratagem, allowing a 4-up deny attempt for enemy psychic powers within 18 inches of any of your units. On the unique unit side of things, the Necron Dynasty features none other than the Silent King. As a large model Lord of War, Xeric has the potency you would expect: strong ranged and melee attack potential, good defense, good supportive buffs, and notably, abilities to restrict enemy units to fighting last in the fight phase, the ability to make a Deny the Witch attempt, and the ability to once per battle swap out command protocols, which complements the mandatory Necron Warlord trait quite well, since assigning one protocol twice means you will have more choice provided by the ability. On to the Mefrit Dynasty. Known for the destruction and weaponizing of stars, Mefrit appropriately take on a shape that is focused wholly towards offensive efficiency with a predilection for shooting. All of their army-wide tools layer towards that focus. Their dynastic code, Solar Fury, increases the range of all non-pistol ranged weapons by 3 inches, and if an enemy unit is within half range of ranged weapons, their AP is increased by 1. And their protocol Double Dip is the protocol of the Vengeful Stars, which is the shooting one, granting wound rolls of 6 a further additional point of AP, while at the same time, if an enemy unit is within half range, they do not receive the benefits of cover, which is already where you want to be to make use of their dynastic code. Their back-end tools are all offense-oriented, but are more evenly split between melee and shooting. Their Warlord trait improves the Warlord's fight potency with an additional point of attack and strength, while their Relic is an enhanced Relic Gauss Blaster. And Mefrit's Stratagem allows a unit to deal 1 mortal wound, up to 3, in addition to the normal damage for each shooting attack with a wound roll of an unmodified 6. Next up, the Blood-Hungry Novak Dynasty. Novak's shape foils that of Mefrit quite well, maximally focused towards offensive efficiency, but their combat predilection skews in the opposite direction, with everything focusing towards melee. And I mean that quite literally. Every unique mechanic of theirs is geared towards the fight phase. Their dynastic code, Awakened by Murder, gives them a +1 to charge, and gives units that charge, intervene, or get charged an extra layer of AP on their melee attacks, which is quite reminiscent of the Blood Angels chapter tactic, sharing the +1 to charge, but pairing that with an admittedly more conservative perk in place of the +1 to wound. To add to this, Novak's Double Dip is the command protocol of the Hungry Void, which is the melee one, granting units which charge, intervene, or get charged +1 to strength, and granting melee attacks with unmodified wound rolls of 6 another layer of AP. Their unique back-end tools further bolster their melee propensity. Their Warlord trait allows the Warlord to dish out mortal wounds. Their Relic the Blood Scythe is a beefed-up War Scythe, and their Stratagem gives a unit +1 to their attacks. Here are the Nefric Dynasty. Unsurprisingly, the Golden Teleporting Dynasty, skew high in movement and flexibility. On the army-wide rules front, their Dynastic Code Translocation Beams give them a 6-up invulnerable save, giving Nephirek a nice defensive layer across the army. Their second perk is the action of their Translocation Beams. It's long-winded to explain in detail, but it can be summarized as, when they advance or fall back, they can ignore models and terrain as if they were not there. And when advancing, they don't roll, instead they always add 6 inches. However, they cannot shoot when they do so. Their double dip command protocol is the protocol of the Sudden Storm, allowing them to leverage both the +1 to their move characteristic and enabling them to shoot with ranged weapons while making an action. On the back end, their warlord trait, Skin of Living Gold, gives a constant defensive perk of a -1 to hit by enemy attacks. Their relic is an upgraded Staff of Light that notably denies targets which are hit the ability to overwatch or set to defend, and their stratagem, Translocation Crypt, allows you to give units the dimensional translocation ability, which effectively allows you to bring them down as standard deep strike, rather than having to opt for strategic reserves. Overall, Nephirek have a finesse-oriented toolkit which demands a higher skill floor to utilize. Moving on to the Nihilak Dynasty, who take on a pretty unique shape, skewing towards flexibility and defense. Their Dynastic Code, Aggressively Territorial, grants all units objectives secured, and allowing models which already are OBSEC to count as 1 additional model. Their second perk is treating enemy attacks of AP-1 as 0. Their double dip protocol is that of the Eternal Guardian, the defensive one which emulates terrain, allowing Nihilak units to be able to take advantage of both counting as gaining the benefit of light cover if they did not make a normal move, advance, or fallback activation, and if they are charged they can either set to defend or hold steady. On the back end side of things, Nihilak have a decent spread of mechanics. Their warlord trait allows the warlord to always fight first. Their relic is a defensive one, allowing the bearer to add 1 to their armor saves, along with a 6-up Feel No Pain. And their stratagem allows an infantry unit to shoot without nullifying an action they are performing. And last but not least we have Sautek, the previous face of the faction before Zarikon arrived. Interestingly, both dynasties have specialization in different methods of flexibility. Where Zarikon have tools to manipulate command protocols, Sautek have mechanisms to manipulate command points, which is a nice way to differentiate and showcase each dynasty's command of strategy. On the army-wide side of things, Sautek skew strongly towards flexibility and shooting, with a notch in offensive efficiency. Their Dynastic Code Relentless Advance allows them to reroll morale tests, and allows them to double rapid-fire effects for targets within 18 inches. Their double dip command protocol is the protocol of the Conquering Tyrant, which I qualify as the utility or flexibility one. It will allow Sautek to benefit from both increasing the aura range of the abilities Lord's Will, My Will Be Done, and Rites of Reanimation by 3 inches, while at the same time allowing units to fall back and shoot with a -1 to hit penalty. The Sautek Warlord trait is a 5-up command point refund, taken when command points are spent. Their relic allows the bearer to force an enemy unit within 3 inches to fight after all their eligible units have fought, similar to the Primaris Judiciar, and their stratagem allows all of your units to gain a +1 to hit with shooting attacks versus an enemy unit that has already been targeted by one of your units. Sautek have 3 unique characters, the first of which is Imhotep the Stormlord. The Pharaoh of the Sautek dynasty has 2 notable abilities. Lord of the Storm enables him to do a once per battle mortal wound bomb, dealing 3 mortal wounds to an enemy model within 48 inches, and dealing D3 mortal wounds to each other unit within 6 inches on a 4-up. And Grand Strategist, granting 2 additional command points if Imhotep is your warlord, which, keep in mind, as a Sautek character, means his warlord trait will serve to refund spent command points. To add further command point control is Nemesor Xandrek, whose counter tactics ability can once per battle deny your opponent's use of a stratagem for the battle round, along with the Transient Madness ability, which can potentially buff a unit within 9 inches with either +1 attack, ballistic skill, or a reroll for their charge roll. And lastly, Vargon Oberon. He can be summarized as a combat character, who notably can fight again if he is destroyed by a melee attack, and can deny enemies from targeting Xandrek with ranged attacks if he's within 3 inches of him, and the ability to teleport within 3 inches of Xandrek in the movement phase. And here they are, the 6 core dynasties and their attributes ranked. I think the result turned out quite well, picturing each of the dynasties' playstyles and their mechanical offerings rather accurately, despite the lack of mechanics available when compared to the previous Marine analyses. And since rankings are quite fun, let's do some comparisons. Here are the dynasties organized by most efficient. Here they are by most flexible, most defensive, most mobile, by melee propensity, and by shooting propensity. Well, that's a wrap on this one. Thanks for watching. These were my assessments / rankings on the Necron Dynasties. I hope you were able to find it interesting if not enjoyable. And if you have any questions or comments, feedback or suggestions, please drop them down below. So, if you enjoyed this video, there is a like button. And if you want to help this channel grow, there is a subscribe button. There is also a bell button and a share button, so press the buttons you want to press. Thanks again for watching, and I will hope to see you guys in the next one.